Welcome, dear viewers, to Heartstring Stories, where every tale whispers truth, emotion, and a lesson you'll never forget. If you're here for stories that touch your soul and remind you of the power of love, patience, and destiny, you're home. Now take a breath, because what you're about to hear will stay with you for a long time. So, it all began on a quiet Sunday morning, in a large brick house that stood proudly at the end of Maplewood Lane. The sun fell gently on the windows, lighting up the white curtains and making them dance softly in the wind. Inside the house, I was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping my tea, enjoying the rare calmness that old age brings when you've lived long, enough to stop rushing. My name is Margaret, though most people just call me Grandma Maggie. I'm 72 years old, a widow, a retired nurse, and a woman who has seen enough life to know when silence is louder than words. My daughter Evelyn lived with me after her husband passed away. She was 38, proud, beautiful, and fiercely protective of everything she loved, especially her late husband's memory. Her marriage had been a roller coaster, moments of passion and long stretches of silence. But when he died suddenly in an accident, she refused to let go of the pain, almost as if her grief was the last thing keeping her connected to him. That morning, Evelyn rushed down the stairs, her hair in rollers, a phone pressed to her ear. "Yes, I'll have everything ready," she said loudly. "Don't worry, they'll love it. My husband's family is coming today, and I want everything to be perfect." She ended the call, looked at me, and frowned. "Mom, please don't touch the food in the fridge. I've prepared everything. His family will be here soon, and I don't want anything messed up." Her tone was sharp, not cruel but commanding, like a queen giving orders in her castle. I smiled gently, said nothing, and took another sip of my tea. She opened the fridge, rearranging dishes like she was handling diamonds. Plates of roast chicken, pies, and trays of desserts filled every shelf. I had helped buy all the groceries the day before, quietly watching her stress over every detail. It was her way of showing love. Control was her comfort. By noon, the table was set with her finest china. The smell of baked bread filled the air, and soft jazz played from the old radio. Everything looked perfect, but in her heart, something was missing. Peace. She was trying so hard to impress people who barely called her since her husband's funeral. Around 2 o'clock, Evelyn changed into a pale blue dress and pearls. She looked beautiful, but the tension in her eyes told another story. She wanted their approval. She wanted them to see she was still holding the family name high, even without him. When the doorbell rang, she froze for a second, inhaled sharply, and smiled as if she'd been waiting for this moment all her life. I opened the door. There they stood, her husband's family. His mother, sharp-eyed and elegantly dressed, carrying the air of a woman used to being obeyed. His two sisters followed, whispering and looking around as if inspecting the place. They greeted Evelyn politely but without warmth. I stayed quiet, watching from a distance. Evelyn brought out the food, serving them like a hostess on a royal stage. The family ate, commented politely, but their smiles never reached their eyes. I could feel the unspoken judgment in the room, the kind that drips slowly, like poison, leaving no visible wound but burning deep. When they were done, they thanked her stiffly and left. No hug, no real compliment, just shallow words and cold air. As soon as the door closed, Evelyn stood still, her eyes filled with tears, her hands trembling slightly. "They didn't like it," she whispered. "After everything I did, they didn't even thank me properly." I walked to her, touched her shoulder gently, and said, "Sometimes, no matter how much you give, people who can't see your heart will never see your effort." She nodded but said nothing. That night, she barely ate. The next morning, I decided to do something different. I wanted to teach her a lesson, not out of anger, but out of love. She was drowning in the approval of people who didn't care if she sank. She needed to remember her worth, not as a widow, but as a woman, as a daughter, as someone who still had life left to live. So, while she went out to buy flowers for the house, I quietly replaced the food in the freezer with old plastic, containers filled with ice cubes and a few sealed boxes of vegetables. Then I left a note taped to the freezer door. Love doesn't need proof, it needs peace. When she returned, she looked furious. Mom, didn't I tell you not to touch the food? My husband's family is coming again this evening. I made everything fresh. I didn't argue. I just smiled and went to sit on the couch, knitting silently. She stormed into the kitchen, mumbling under her breath. When she opened the freezer, there was a pause. A long, still pause. Then a sharp scream. She ran into the living room, holding one of the empty containers, her face red. Where's all the food? I looked up, calm as ever, and said softly, Gone, just like your peace. You've been serving others while starving your own soul. For a moment, she looked at me like she didn't understand. Then slowly, the meaning sank in. Tears welled up in her eyes, not from anger this time, but realization. She sank to her knees, crying quietly. Mom, she whispered, I just wanted them to like me, to see that I'm still part of them. I put my knitting aside, walked to her, and knelt too. My darling, you've always been enough. You don't need to feed their pride to prove your worth. You're already family, and family isn't built on approval. It's built on love. That night, there was no dinner for guests. No fancy china. Just the two of us sitting together, eating toast and soup, talking about her husband, not as a memory to be worshipped, but as a part of her heart that would always live quietly within her. Weeks passed. She began smiling again. Real smiles, not the painted ones she used for guests. She started teaching at the community center, helping young widows find their way back to life. And every evening she would make tea for us both and say, Mom, you were right. I was feeding the wrong hunger. Years went by and our house changed. The walls got older, but our hearts got lighter. One spring morning, I sat by the window watching Evelyn plant roses in the garden. She hummed a tune her husband used to sing, and for the first time in a long time, it didn't sound sad. It sounded like peace. One day, she came into my room holding a letter. Mom, she said softly, his mother wrote to me. She said she's sorry. She said she realized how hard I tried, and she wants to visit, not for food, not for formality, just to talk. I smiled. See? When love is real, it finds its way even through silence. That evening, the doorbell rang again. This time there were no fancy dishes, no frozen meals, no tension. Just 3 women sitting around a table, drinking tea, sharing stories, and forgiving the years that pride had stolen. When the night ended, Evelyn hugged me tightly. Mom, that day when you smiled and said nothing, when I shouted at you, I'll never forget it. You didn't punish me. You saved me. I laughed softly. Sometimes silence teaches louder than words ever can. The years went by and life moved as it always does. Quietly, beautifully, unpredictably. Evelyn eventually remarried, a kind man who loved her laughter, not her perfection. Their wedding was small, held in the garden where she once cried. The roses bloomed around them like witnesses to her growth. And every time she opened the freezer, she would smile. Because where once there had been food meant to please others, there were now meals cooked for joy, for family, for love. I grew older, slower, but happier. I would sit in my rocking chair, listening to her laughter echo through the house, and whisper to myself, Thank you, life, for teaching me that silence can save hearts. When I eventually passed away, peacefully, in my sleep, Evelyn found a note on my nightstand. It read, My dearest daughter, if you ever feel that people do not value your efforts, remember, the right ones will never need proof. Fill your home with kindness, not perfection. Fill your heart with peace, not pride. And when you serve food again, serve it with love, not fear. Years later, Evelyn told this story on her own YouTube channel. She called it the freezer lesson. She said, My mother taught me that love isn't about serving others to earn their place at your table. It's about opening your heart. Even if no one brings a plate. Her video went viral. Millions watched, cried, shared, and said it reminded them of their mothers, their grandmothers, or someone they once took for granted. And somewhere, I like to believe, I smiled again. From wherever love goes after life, proud that silence, once misunderstood, had become her loudest lesson. Sad moral. Love doesn't shout, it whispers. It teaches through patience, through quiet gestures, and sometimes through the power of saying nothing at all